Okay, I'm going to kick us off. We still have people showing up, but I'm not sure how many will show up a little late, but we're going to get started almost on time. And I would like to begin by thanking everyone for coming to this session about the future of office space. And I'd like to ask Ashley Henry of Business for a Better Portland, who is a presenter of this event, helping us get the word out, to just give us a 1-minute overview of what is BBPDX and the kinds of activities it's involved in.
Sure. Thanks so much, Joshua, and really appreciate Joshua and his team for pulling this together. We are a membership organization that now has over 400 businesses and nonprofit organizations as members. We started in 2017 with just 15 members, and it's been a real thrill to find that there's such a desire to be involved, such a market for our work. We provide, I don't know about you, but I find looking into a screen to just be like, really freezes me up. I'm very sorry. But we work in 3 major areas of policy, and with a focus on housing and homelessness, transportation, and economic development. And in the wake of the COVID crisis, we have been leading an effort to advocate for more resources for businesses that are suffering as a result of the pandemic. And today we officially launched Oregon Small Business United, which is a coalition that we have with the Native American Chamber and many other organizations. And I think that the fact that Fat Pencil Studios has offered to organize this is really emblematic of the kinds of members we have. And I was looking for an email from Joshua just a moment ago, and I was reminded that at our 3rd birthday party in the before COVID times, Fat Pencil Studios was actually awarded the Bridge Builder Award for the amazing work that they've done as a BBPDX member. And I just put the picture of them in the chat from when they received the award at their office. So without further ado, I'll just say thank you so much to Joshua and Jazzy and all of you for organizing today.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And I would like to also introduce 6 panelists who have joined us today. And they have a variety of different expertise that will help us sort of frame the question. And I'll start with recognizing Jamal Brown, who is an Associate VP at Colliers International. Jamal, you want to unmute briefly and say hello?
Hey guys, thanks for joining.
And just say, I'm doing that because some folks, depending on how their Zoom setup is, they might not necessarily see you unless you speak. And when you speak, it'll put you front and center so they know who you are. And let's also recognize Alicia Prohorova, and she is an associate advisor at SVM Bluestone and Hockley.
Thank you for having me.
And Kevin Kavanaugh, who's owner of Guerrilla Development, a organization that is responsible for buildings such as the Fairhair Dumbbell and the Tree Farm in the Central East Side.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Hey, Kevin. Katrina Yuen is a HR consultant specializing in startups, small businesses, and nonprofits. Oh, didn't hear you, Katrina.
Hey everyone, looking forward to our discussion today.
Eric Hoffman is a principal at Some Design Studio and Architecture, specializing in financial, office space, and breweries.
Good to be here today, Joshua. Thanks.
And finally, my colleague Jazzy Winston is a designer at Fat Pencil Studio, and she has previously worked at design firms both in the United States and in China.
Hello.
So it looks like we now have a little over 30 folks on with us. And I will tell you, as we are doing our main session, I would ask people to keep their microphones muted while they are in the main session, unless you are speaking and recognized to speak. However, we are going to have some breakout rooms today. And when you're in the breakout room, please unmute. And the purpose of that is to have a smaller group to talk about the things you know and would like to know about the issue what our office spaces are going to look like in the future. So I know earlier last week when I started talking about organizing this, Colin at BBPDX sent me this nice little meme, and it got me thinking. I've been thinking a lot about when I could go back to the office and what it might look like when I get there. And I would go and Google, like, who's writing about this issue. And I think what I realized after doing that for a little while is that we are in a crisis without precedent. And the answer of what it's going to be like to go back to the office is probably different for every company. So rather than waste a lot of time looking for a guru to tell me the answer, I felt like it would be better to convene a group of peers that are going through some of the same issues that we all are, and just talk about how do we frame the question. So for me, understanding how others think about a problem is usually a very good way to figure out what to do next. And in order to meet that objective, I'm going to ask you to talk and share in the breakout rooms and bring some of that knowledge back to the main session where we can discuss those points. And we'll also get a chance to hear some more detailed information from each of our panelists. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you the first breakout room question, and it's in honor of World Emoji Day, which I found out is tomorrow. And so I'm going to ask you to think about, while I set up the breakout rooms, it's going to take me about 30 seconds to do that. So while I'm doing that, go ahead and tell me, think about what you want to tell your breakout room folks about your name, company, and your favorite emoji. So I'm going to now just brief follow-up on the first warm-up exercise, and I'm going to share my screen again. So a couple notes on emojis. Number one is that if you look at the top 10 emojis used on Twitter, the tears of joy remained on top for the past couple of years, but there's been some interesting movement. The pleading eyes emoji has gone up quite a bit, and the thanks hands are gone up a little bit. It's just all kinds of funny stuff you can learn about emojis if you're so inclined. And also, if you want to vote for your favorite, like the most quote unquote 2020 emoji, you can still do that. You get one more day to go to twitter.com emoji awards. So if you get bored at all during the meeting, that's something you can do to vote for your favorite. But let's go ahead and get into the more details of why we're here today. And that is to talk about offices. And one thing I wanted to start with is what is the meaning of the word company? Because I think that for me, it tells a little bit about why it's important to work together. And so we've got a etymology of the word is from Latin, com meaning with together and panis meaning bread. So it's literally someone that you would break bread with or share meals with, things you're going to be doing things together. So before, a company meant a business association, it was a companion. And I think that's an important core part of what we all do together for work. And humans, while we're very adaptable, I think one of our core needs, the core needs of us, of our human nature to do things together should not be ignored when we're talking about our business endeavors as well. So with that in mind, we're going to get into kind of our first sort of forming framework question, which is, in your business, I'm curious if we can talk about what is something that your team does as a part of your work that is difficult to do together remotely. For example, at my firm, Fat Pencil Studio, we often try to draw a story or an issue that we're thinking about how to explain. And it's easier to do that when you're sketching in the same space as opposed to trying to do it remotely. So I'm going to go ahead and start the breakout rooms back up again. And this is going to be the prompt that you're going to try to discuss. This time you'll have 4 minutes to talk about this. And when we return, I'll ask a couple folks to volunteer interesting anecdote from their breakout room. So let's get those back started again. People back from the breakout rooms now. And so what I'm going to do is ask if anyone would like to just raise a hand and share a particular story that was mentioned in your breakout room with the rest of the group. And I'm trying to think if I can see people raising their hands.
Joshua, in the beginning, like there's been more people added. Maybe you can tell about raising the hand again.
Okay. So does anyone know if you haven't tried this before, if you open your participants window or look at your name, there should be a little spot next to it where you can raise your hand. Or if you can't find that, you could also just, there we go. I see Wendy's got her hand raised. So why don't we start with you, Wendy? Do you want to share something from your breakout room?
Sure. Well, I think a couple people mentioned just the lack of when you're communicating with your coworkers through Zoom, that there is less of an opportunity to through Zoom and also through Slack, there's less of an opportunity to engage with them on a human level and more informal level, and to we all know the difficulties of communicating by written word as opposed to in person. And so all of those things, I think, represent a loss, both just on a personal basis and also in terms of our ability to get work done. So those informal work connections in between meetings aren't happening.
Got it.
And yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that's something that I know for sure has been a big deal for me. And maybe we have time for one more. Would anyone else like to just briefly talk about a story that came up in their breakout room? And maybe one of the panelists could sort of pipe in here. Jamal, you want to go for it?
Sure. So one of the things that Dave and I were talking about is that your space can be a representation of your brand and just how that's portrayed to the rest of the marketplace. And, you know, if you're having a Zoom meeting, you can't really portray that the same. I think it also helps with the people that work there and the culture of just the collaboration and whatnot. So, you know, it's the public's view of your brand in a lot of ways.
I think that's insightful. There's only so far you can go with virtual backgrounds. And I know for my work, a lot of it depends on confidence that we can get the job done. And there's nothing like bringing someone into your space and spending time with them to, to build that confidence. So with that, I want to jump into the sort of main part of our discussion here. I'm going to ask each of our panelists sort of an opening question and get some comments in a variety of different areas. And I wanted to start in the area of employees, because this is, for me, as leading a company, it's been a little bit of a point of anxiety for me, because I feel like, okay, if we're going to go back to the office, that means I have to tell all of my employees to we're going to come back to the office. And after being off for nearly 5 months now, it just seems like that's a big change. So I wanted to ask Katrina, what are some of the best practices when you're asking employees to make a significant schedule change that would apply in this situation? How do you go about it?
Thanks, Josh. And I want to thank you all again for joining this discussion. And asking your employees, there's a lot of responsibility around that you're taking on as an employer. So first, I wanted to give a couple scenarios of what a significant schedule change might look like these days. So, and I'm also assuming at this point that, of course, you've already decided and you're confident that it's safe and it's time to have employees return to the office, and that you have other tools in place like online health declarations, safety precautions, etc. So one schedule change might be that when work sites or offices open again, you all companies might be asking employees to come in a staggered schedule, or just to minimize the number of people and exposure, or in phases based on business continuity and priority. Another significant schedule might mean accommodating childcare or other caregiving challenges folks have when they have minimal or no options for that caregiving, or if you have to work around a care provider, your co-caregiver's schedule. So And then from there, so those are the scenarios. And then identify which employees are crucial or essential that you really need to have back in the office, right? It might be, who are those team members who need to be there for specialized equipment or really just to kind of enhance that business continuity. And that will help you prioritize as you gradually bring people back into the office in phases, your communication plan. And then you have to kind of take another step and think of those people who are your priority employees, that they're different types of employees and they have different types of needs. So some of them might have been furloughed, so you have to go through the process of recalling them. Some might have reduced hours, some might be on leave. Some people just don't want to return yet. And then some people are ready and they've been ready. They don't have many concerns and nothing to really kind of keep them at home. So another good practice with all that in mind is to survey your folks, survey your teams, ask them what their concerns are so you have a good understanding of what their challenges are. So that might be childcare, caring for others, their own immune systems, fear or challenges with public transportation, fear, anxiety in general. It's a real thing, right? Or just, and some people are ready, and it's a really good tool. So use the tools that you have to find out where your folks are at. I really can't reiterate enough that now is the time to listen to your employees and make sure that in addition to your business needs, you're really taking their needs into consideration during this time. And of course, you all probably have heard that a lot of companies, organizations are asking employees to volunteer, right? That's a good first step to know if you can't survey or if you're still having a hard time, you just get those folks to volunteer and see how you can work that into your plan. And it's also really good to have an objective process in place that you can apply consistently and equitably across your organization as you develop your return to office plan. Have a schedule. Oh yeah.
I was to say that's a good. I think that's a good spot to leave it, and we can come back to it a little bit. But I want to make sure we don't run out of time in our hour. And I wanted to say thank you because that's good to hear. Some of those things in one chunk like that. It helped me feel more calm about it. I will say, in addition to thinking about our people, we also need to think about our spaces that we're going to go back to. And there are some things you can do with the design of your current space. And I wanted to ask Eric Hoffman to comment a little bit about some thoughts he's had about little things that can be done with existing office spaces to make them a more healthy and productive place to work given our current constraints. And I'm going to share my screen so that he can have some visuals for that discussion. So Eric, I'll do that now. Why don't you go ahead and start your commentary?
Thanks, Joshua. So in our office, we've had some conversations about not what happens in the next 6 months, but what happens to the office in 9, 12 months and onward, kind of in a post-COVID situation. What are people going to want to see in an office that even though they may have a vaccine and may feel better about coming to work, what are the long-lasting ramifications of the last 8 months and the coming 6 months, 8 months from now? So we did some brainstorming around that, and we've kind of captured some of the items here. So an office currently might have a series of open workstations without a lot of separation, which in many ways is a good thing. It promotes collaboration, discussions, conversation, and sharing. But in a space where people from now on may have a bit more need for privacy, or at least some distancing from their neighbors, what can be done, as well as conference rooms, break rooms, and that sort of thing. So if you can roll forward, Joshua. One of the things you might see is that workstations might get taller, but we'll try to do that with a clear product, be it glass or some sort of polyacrylic or something to that effect. So we still have an openness, and we still don't try to get back into the 80s version of 8-foot tall fabric panels, but we keep everything still with a low horizon in your view lines. I think there's going to be a lot more web chat continuing even after people can come back to work and feel somewhat safe, because you'll find that there's quite a bit more time saving with that. So perhaps stations are modified a little bit or have some new components to it. So you have backgrounds and backdrops that aren't necessarily a filing cabinet or flowers on a counter. Then we took a look at larger spaces like conference rooms and break rooms, what could be happening with that. So if you could roll forward on that one. So right now you have conference rooms with a door, perhaps not operable windows, break rooms with a lot of clustered seating, sinks next to microwaves, next to refrigerators and closed cabinets. So we envision a future that might, if you go to the next slide, you'll see conference rooms start to open up where you'll have large movable wall sections. So you can have some more kind of free flowing people and air. I think you're going to see operable windows really come into play, which is easier on older buildings, such as the office that we have. We just went around and made sure that we could get painted shut windows back open again, but I think you'll see some modifications of other existing buildings to incorporate more operable windows. And of course, new buildings and new design will probably continue to see that increase as it already has started to in new construction. Break rooms, you're going to see, I think, more open shelving. You're going to see kind of areas or pods where you might have a food preparation area. You might have a dishwashing area that are separated. So again, people don't have to cluster. I think you're going to see more of coffee kind of breakout areas amongst an office space. So you don't have to go to the break room necessarily. There might be a little niche somewhere at one end of the office for some coffee and soft drinks and cold water, so you don't necessarily have to travel to a break room. And I think you'll also see conferencing that doesn't necessarily happen in a room, but you'll see collaboration areas that are open near, collaboration areas spread out amongst an office so that you can be close to an area and not have to travel throughout the office to get to a meeting location. I think a lot of these things are going to come into play, and they're just, generally speaking, good design direction anyway, but it will ease people's anxiety about returning to the office, even though they may be vaccinated and feeling comfortable. In that sense, an enclosed space will not be the doom and gloom that it currently is in today's climate.
So in addition to the physical space, there's also a question of what happens in an office from a cultural standpoint. And the question is, will this crisis change some of the cultural norms that we have? And I wanted to bring Jazzy into the conversation because she's worked in office spaces in other cultures. And I thought I'd ask her to share a couple anecdotes from her experience working in China.
Yeah, when I was working in China, I was working in an architecture firm, and they believe that it's that cold air and keeping the windows open is good for ventilation and helping the air quality, which I believe as well. And even in the winter though, and Chinese winter is very cold, but there they would just keep the windows open and then people would just wear jackets and nobody was really complaining about it, but me, the American. But they really just, we're so used to being very comfortable. And I think going forward, we might have to start to think about in situations where the health and the quality of the workspace or the environment that you're in is probably like overriding your absolute comfort at every level. And so I worked in a jacket and that was fine. And we kept the air clean. And so.
Thanks, Jazzy. I think that there's going to be definitely some adjustments that go on. And I wonder if we're seeing some of that already. And I want to bring Alicia into the conversation because she's worked with tenants both before and after the pandemic hit. And I'm wondering, Alicia, if you could talk a little bit about how people's priorities may seem to be changing as they look for office spaces right now.
Yeah, sure. I have a few things. First of all, because of such fast changing preferences of office users, office space has already started to change drastically way before we even learned about the pandemic. So it's actually quite difficult to pinpoint the exact effects that just this pandemic is responsible for. Second of all, it is not a one hat fit all, as many already mentioned. We have from startups to established small businesses, family owned and operated, to giants hiring thousands of employees nationwide. And then you take into consideration the culture, leader to employee relationship, transparency, and much more. And because of all of that, each business within that category reacts a bit differently to the crisis. So back to what I was saying, it is fairly difficult to determine what a business leader should do, as every decision maker has a different approach for what would work best for their business. Our team does not have concrete evidence that the goals themselves have shifted. However, the strategies and ways to get to that goal, whichever it may be, may very well have. We have observed an increased amount of calls for suburban office space. So hypothetically, one could make a claim that there's a growing demand for a suburban office, like decision makers in the area that may desire to move all or part of their office closer to their homes to cut parking headaches and maybe the overhead costs that downtown may come with. But we've all heard that before. But hypothetically speaking, by moving all or part of their office space to suburban areas, businesses may be able to afford even more space for the same cost and be able to more effectively maintain the 6-foot social distancing requirements, especially taking into consideration the chances that we might see something like this happen again in the foreseeable future. If how businesses do work has changed and will stay changed, then that will force the office space to adapt. How exactly that may look like is a very good question. One concern that we've heard raised several times actually would go back to Katrina and her specialty. If you're shifting most of your employees to work from home, and what if they don't have the right equipment or fast enough internet or any space in their home set up as professional office space? That actually was brought up in one of our discussion groups too. Will the employees ask the employer to pay extra for their inconveniences? And if they do, how much would they ask for? We've heard from a few businesses that they're considering moving certain departments to completely work remotely. So now with all those potential conveniences and extra costs, would that still be more effective and feasible for the business structure? And one last question that was brought up was co-working space. Before the pandemic, many businesses have already been implementing the work from home, sometime in the office. But now with everyone being forced to learn how to work remotely, some still want to experience at least some aspect of collaborating when this is all over, especially with the fact that our state of emergency period has just been extended to September 30th. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. And I think one of the questions that's been on my mind as I start to think about whether we may need to shift our space needs is what are landlords thinking about? And it seems likely, but maybe that's just my own frame of reference. It seems like there could be an increase in the amount of vacant office space. And I'm wondering, does this mean that tenants get to try to extract a lot of concessions from landlords? But I'm guessing the answer is probably more nuanced than that. And I wanted to bring Jamal into the conversation because he's had an opportunity over the past few years to work with a number of different building owners, and I think could provide some insight into that question.
Hey guys. So yeah, I would say there is more nuance to it. Different landlords have different motivations. So it's I would say it's too early to say what the impact of COVID is going to have on office space overall. But prior to all of this, vacancy was increasing. So there was just more supply of office space coming online versus probably 2 years ago. So with more vacancy, you could say generally that landlords are a little bit more flexible. But again, different landlords have different motivations. So some landlords are driven by occupancy. So if they have a space that's empty, they just want to fill it. They can reduce the rental rate to try to get an occupier to take the space. Some more institutional players are very driven by their face rate. So they need a certain rental rate, but they can be more flexible on the tenant improvements or the free rent. I don't know how much COVID-19 is going to affect the vacancy rate, but prior to COVID-19, the vacancy rate was already kind of creeping up a little bit. So it was becoming more of a buyer's or tenants market.
Got it. And then finally, with respect to buildings, I think there's an interesting question about will building owners rethink the kinds of spaces that might be more rentable and actually change the type of product that's being brought to market. And for one example that came to my mind is, if we have restaurant spaces that are becoming vacant, might they be repurposed to, offer catered business meetings that might be difficult to pull off safely in a high-rise conference room, that sort of thing. And I wanted to bring Kevin on to the discussion. I know he's got a lot of restaurant and office, creative office tenants, and just see what is your insight, Kevin, into this idea about rethinking the types of spaces that are coming to market.
Great question. So oddly enough, I am signing more restaurant tenants in the last 60 days than I have any other kind of tenant, but they're micro restaurants and they're made for to go and they're made for COVID. So that works. What Applebee's does right now, I don't know, they're screwed. But there's office interest. So there's two things that matter in my opinion. HVAC. I mean, HVAC was just something that we just did because we want fresh air and we like 72 degrees. And like Jazzy said, we as Americans have to have 72 degrees or else we freak out. So HVAC is important. I think culturally, I love the idea of like the sweater revolution. Back in the day, I talked about doing green buildings that were dumb for smart people, but like they don't have a lot of moving parts. So they're not overly intelligent. Just put on your damn sweater and have the heat be at 65 and call it good. I think we're going to venture into that. So there's going to be a lot of discussions about air change, fresh air. Like Eric showed in his slides, his office has a lot of operable windows. That was like a concern before for security. Now it's like a huge benefit, and it makes tenants happy. I'm not doing huge changes. My buildings take 2 years to make. I think that this will last maybe 2 years. I don't think it'll last significantly past 2 years. So I don't want to be silly about being hyper reactive. I'm just finding that if you do good design with strong, increase your HVAC, I'm getting more calls from people coming down the ladder than going up the ladder. For the last 10 years, I've been getting people moving from their small office or their garage or their home office or WeWork, and they're hanging their first shingle in one of my buildings. Now I'm getting people downtown paying twice the rent per square foot, moving into, for example, the tree farm, half the space, they're paying a quarter rent coming down the ladder. They're getting more creative in the way that Katrina talked about, using the space better and more efficiently, but they don't need to use it the way we've always been defaulting to use it. So those are things that I've been surprised by. But aside from, an office is basically an airline cabin. Either you're gonna feel comfortable in it or you're not. And if I can sit down there and I'm not packed cheek to jowl with other travelers, and if there's a window open, and if I know that my landlord has a heating and cooling system that has twice the amount of fresh air than code requires, I'm fine on that airplane. So I think that's how people are thinking. And as a landlord, I just have to make a pretty airplane.
Well, I really appreciate that insight. And I am thinking that now that the thing to do that I'd like to do, and I will just kind of quickly share the next question that we have to talk about, and that is what comes next. And I want to give people a chance, a little bit longer chance this time, to talk in a smaller group about what do you anticipate is going to be your next step to getting back into work in person. And maybe maybe you've taken that first step and you can share that with us, or maybe you're just thinking about it and want to run an idea by folks. So I'm going to go ahead and open the breakout room sessions now. You'll have 6 minutes this time. I did make the counter actually accurate. So please use that time, talk about what might come next. And I might pop into one or more breakout rooms to see how things are going, but I'll see y'all back in the main session in about 6 minutes. Well, I hope everyone had some good discussions in the breakout rooms. And what I would like to do is just spend a little time sharing a couple stories of what you heard. I'll kick this one off while maybe a couple other folks can think of an idea that they'd like to share from their conversation. I was biking down Southeast Ankeny a couple weeks ago, coming back from picking up something in our office, and noticed I was passing an architecture firm that had about 20 people or so sitting in the parking lot outside their building, each about 6 feet away from each other in some kind of a chair. And, you know, it was a nice day. They seemed to be having a grand old time. I'm guessing that was a staff meeting, but it struck me as a positive first step. I don't know that they're all actually working in their office, but I'm curious to hear what other people talked about in their sessions, things that you're going to start to do first or would like to do first. And just go ahead and raise a hand, and I will recognize you. This is putting people on the spot, but Alicia, do you have your hand up? And then Kevin?
Yes, one thing I wanted to mention, it was actually not, we didn't get to mention that in our group chat, but in our discussion groups, but one business actually brought up a very good point back, and they said when they will be going back because there's certain people that are not comfortable being so close to somebody else. But if, let's say, somebody you're standing in some type of line, you're keeping a distance, and somebody just forgets that you have to stand 6 feet away and they get too close to you, and if you turn around and tell them, hey, would you please back off, some might actually be take that and not feel very good about that. So what an employer has told me that they're considering is like those wristbands that are like green, yellow, red, which would tell you, if you're okay with, or if you're more like stay as far away from me, or and that would kind of right away tell you if what they're comfortable with without actually having to.
Yeah, I like that. I see the thumbs up. Kevin, what's on your mind?
Well, nothing. I was just gonna quote Craig in our group, Craig Rice. He's in Oakland, which is kind of interesting, and they have kind of a different scenario. And Craig, I'm telling your story, but basically 4 days on, 10 days off, 2 different shifts. Like it seems like he's deeper into the logistics of it than a lot of companies locally I'm hearing about. So yeah, I'm excited. Aside from moving to San Diego, where I can work in the parking lot every day, I think we got to get creative with this.
Yeah, I was saying we've gained a lot of trust in how we work from home. We've advanced from technology and just kind of understanding how we work in our teams. We do want to move back to work on projects that need a lot of collaboration in the front end of projects, get them off the ground. So we're using this phased approach of taking our staff, dividing it in half, or in Portland, we're dividing it by a quarter, gradually phasing in, getting a feel for working together again, and there'll be a 3-phase kind of approach to getting back. And then some big investment in how we use our existing HVAC systems, as was talked about in the earlier session. So we're trying to use all the basics and get ourselves feeling comfortable working together, but also making good use of what we've learned from work from home. So we're blending those together. We need twice as much space for half as much people, and gradually we'll merge it all back together into where we were, hopefully.
Anything else that somebody wants to share that came up in their breakout session?
We should all go get raincoats.
Yes.
It's coming. Winter is coming. And so there's going to be a lot more things outside, and I think a lot of different offices are going to be taking advantage of our fresh valley air. I think we're in the valley. Are we in the valley? And so yeah, I think that it comes back to that comfort thing that we were talking about before, is that it's not going to be some of the approaches, some of the phases that we're going to are not going to be super fun, but also this isn't fun. So like, different, it's going to have to adjust your feeling of comfort.
I like it. So let me conclude sort of a couple things that were observations from my end. One is it's really helpful to just hear a calm assessment from people that know the different sides of this question. The HR question, the office design question, the leasing and building design questions. And secondly, that there's little things that we can all do, like wearing a wristband or getting a better collection of sweaters to help make the transition more manageable. And I do hope that we all find that we can get back to working together. I know for us, it's a big boost to the creativity that we're able to deliver in our projects. And what I want to encourage you to do now in the last sort of 3 minutes that we have is just jump on the chat and leave any kind of comment. It could be just like, hey, it was great, or I enjoyed this thing, or next time maybe consider doing this. But also, if you do have a particular product or resource or just general tip that you'd like to share with this group, and also the larger group of people that were interested in this topic but maybe didn't have a chance to jump on today. We had almost 70 people sign up for a ticket, which, obviously for a free event, we're not expecting everyone to show up, but I do have the ability to get this recording available to folks online, and I think I can export the contents of the chat room as well, so that if people want to, just mention something that they're doing that other folks might find useful, that's a great place to put it, and then I can share that out with the rest of the group via Eventbrite. So with that, if anyone needs to jump off at 3, you've got another commitment, please, by all means, feel free to do so. But I'm going to stay on a bit longer. If anyone wants to just continue the conversation with a thought that they had, I can stay on until about 3:15. So I'm happy to do it and leave the rooms open just to general conversation. And again, really appreciate you all coming, and let's keep the conversation going. So Kevin, can you tell me on the tree farm, and I guess this is let me just put this one other slide that I had in my slide deck up. It's not the tree farm, but it's like a similar idea. And I think you mentioned, like, this is probably impractical. Like, we don't really need to design.
That's not the tree farm.
Yeah. Exactly. This is a design for Nice, so it's like the climate is a little different than here. But the thing I thought was pretty likable about this particular building, eye candy, was this this outdoor conference room. And maybe the answer is that I just should move to Nice. But
well, the funny thing is, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, Douglas is on this call, and he's a tenant at the tree farm, and the tree farm and the dumbbell both have fixed windows. So I'm mad at myself. That's a shitty design for COVID. That's probably a shitty design for in any scenario. And it was designed first over function. And now I'm just trying to figure out ways how to pump more fresh air in there. They're both high-end HVAC systems, so it's better than any other building, most of the other buildings in the market. But I look at this design, and aside from the trees, there's nothing that my building resembles this building. This building's way better from in a COVID world.
Hey, Kevin, with the size of the windows of Tree Farm, could you have made windows that big operable?
I could have put mullions in them and had a hopper or something in every window to create cross ventilation. And there are ways to retrofit it. And that's something I'm thinking of for all the buildings. I mean, we can't just shrug our shoulders. I mean, Douglas, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've thought about because we're obviously trying to, we're looking at our TI right now and really assessing how are we using the space. In our breakout, one of the things that we talked about was how, with my work with Gensler back when I was in San Francisco, they were in the midst of doing a redesign of their offices, their headquarters there, and a lot of the discussion around open offices and the trends had already started to shift away from open office as it is. So one of the byproducts of open offices is that you end up with these huddle or breakout rooms, which I really appreciate as somebody who likes the back and forth of an open office. The noise is problematic lots of times. So I like to be able to slip into an office or a smaller space to work with people. And suddenly those look to be slightly more problematic in terms of vector pods. In terms of the windows, I would say that when we were over at Fairhair Dumbbell, the upshot there is that you have a lot of smaller windows. You could just pop one out and make them operable, right? Because you have a really standardized modular fenestration pattern that you've got there. So I see that it's going to be slightly more tricky at the tree farm, but there's also maybe the opportunity to have maybe these, you have large spans between the windows, the very large windows. Maybe there's an opportunity to actually install a small operable window similar to what you've got there. I mean, obviously that's a completely different problem, but it can also be handled via HVAC, because as we have to build out a conference room, for instance, maybe we think about how we handle makeup air or fresh air exchanges and things like that.
Exactly.
I will say that one thing that's occurred to me is whether organizations might consider doing almost like pop-up offices, where in the past they'd had everybody centralized in a large office in a downtown environment, maybe identifying several offices in a metro area in more neighborhood settings that people could come into, but they wouldn't necessarily be coming into every day. And then identify the cohort that'll use each office so that it's a small sort of self-contained group. But then at least you have a home base if you do need to have a meeting with a larger organization. It's not pulling everybody up into a high-rise building. Maybe it's there's an entry off the street. Maybe the conference room is right inside the door, so you can have people come in and be guests in a well-ventilated space and not necessarily have to walk through the entire office to get to a conference room.
Well, Alicia mentioned the attraction of suburban product right now, and all of my suburban office space, not suburban, my like east side, close in, less dense spaces are super COVID friendly, or designed to work in COVID. New crusher court, garage doors. I mean, every space opens into the outdoors, not into a hallway. And you're going to get more opportunities for that from a design perspective. Eric and Douglas and Joshua, like anyone in the design world can make a lot of neat hay when you don't have to pack in a 5/1 project with a shaft for we know what that model looks like. And I could see a 200-person company having 4 50-person outposts, and I'd be much more attracted to doing that. A, it would reduce my commute time.
Mm-hmm.
B, I could work in clusters. We work better in clusters. C, it's just going to be safer. There is no D.
Kevin, you also mentioned earlier about seeing so much more demand for retail. And on our end, we actually have, whatever happened in the last month and a half, that amount of calls where I didn't mention that in my presentation just because retail office, 2 different things, but we're signing so many leases. We've had a space in Northeast Halsey, about 1,150 square feet, fairly small. There's a little office area, 1 restroom, nothing to it. And it's been sitting in the market for, not gonna lie, 10 years. Way before my partner and I got to it. It's just been vacant. We've, had some tenants turnover. The restaurant we just leased out, but it's just in the middle. It's a little awkward, and there was never any real serious demand for it. Within the last month, we've got so many calls. We've written multiple offers, and we're right now working on a lease for it.
Yeah.
And we're working on several other retail leases, which is very interesting.
Is it a retail tenant, or is it an office taking a ground floor space where there's more flexibility, more airflow?
It is going to be a retail, like a mart. That is, So it is going to be retail.
Yeah.
Service retail in a neighborhood center.
Side note: if a space is empty for 10 years, you need to hire Eric, or that's just a design problem.
Why it's been vacant for so long. I've only been, when I joined the team, my partner had it. He just recently got it too. So that's just what the owners told me. Like, they don't even care. They were waiting for a perfect tenant, and so there was a little bit of that. But any other space in that center, there was never a problem. That one just kept sitting, and however long I've been here, it's just
I hope they found the right one.
We'll see. It's a new business too. They're just starting, and second brand new business we're working with, which is very interesting too. So there's a lot of new business emerging from this. And even though there's COVID, they are not asking for any COVID, any termination options in their lease. And we've told them, because you are a startup, your security deposit will be increasing. They'll do, instead of just, a security deposit that will equal your last month, the owners are doing 2-3 times the security deposit. And, but the tenants are fine. They're not asking for anything different than they would have before COVID.
Is anybody else who we haven't heard from just have ideas that you want to share or questions you want to ask of the panelists?
I'll say one thing real quick. I've been coming to the office, and I know I already shared, sorry about that, but I've been coming into the office pretty regularly. And before the cases started going back up, it seemed like traffic was starting to increase and people were coming back downtown. And obviously, there's been some civil unrest as well. But there was a period of time where it seemed like things were kind of going back to normal downtown, but it's not, it's back to being pretty quiet. The reason I bring that up is I still think that people want to come back downtown to work, and it was definitely happening. It's just pulled back again.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think it's in people's nature to want to spend most of the time in the house.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. I've seen some businesses put up on their websites these public pledges for their employees and for their patrons. Like a gym, for example, has a daily commitment that their staff and their members must take on a daily basis. And you have to retake it every day, pledging that they have socially distanced in their personal lives and they are wearing masks and taking X, Y, and Z precautions so that when they come to work or they come to the gym to exercise, that they're being safe. And I wish that gentleman who shared in our breakout shared the idea of doing that sort of rolling 4-day regimen. I wish he was still here. I wonder what you all think about having something like that that bleeds into people's personal lives, because our personal lives at this point affect our professional lives. It's blurry.
I think that goes back to what we talk about, our comfort. Like, we're not going to get out of this being comfortable. And I think that the sooner people realize that, the sooner we could actually comfortably get back to work. And so I think that you have to give up a little bit, and we have to be more of a group mind, a hive mind, to kind of get this forward. So if that means, telling the people who you hung out with at work, it's just not forever. And so I think that if people can kind of get that in their minds that, like, this is a temporary thing that we're doing until we can make it out of this thing. And so we can get into work conditions that everyone's more happy with. I think it's kind of fine.
I would say, I wish it's probably a question I'd want to pose to Katrina as well from the HR standpoint, but it seems like rather than have a few people at the top of a company put out a pledge for the whole company, it's probably better to have it be something that's developed on a staff level and see, what are the norms that we want to come up with as a group to help deal with this issue. Is it that we are going to have we're all in this together and we're going to go over the top to make our company super safe? Maybe if that's the case, maybe the pledge is appropriate. But I have a feeling that for a lot of organizations, it would be a little bit presumptuous to think that that's where every single person is at. And maybe in cases like that, everyone could come together around some kind of like the wristband idea, which was a new one for me, where you could have something that you would wear or put on your workstation or whatever to indicate what level of comfort do you have with interacting with other people. And maybe that doesn't work exactly right for a gym where you're having people come in and you can't have like the one staff member in the gym who's like, oh, I party all the time at the raves with no mask. That's not going to work. But I think that to be effective, it seems like it would be better to develop that as a group.
It's funny. Maybe it's just too loaded of a topic or question, but our amazing individualism is what makes this country wonderful on so many levels, and it's also why we're sucking ass at COVID-19 globally. I've got Herman in my office, has a son at home with leukemia. Like, it's not my individual right to keep my private life to myself or to not wear a mask. Like Herman's kids got leukemia. That trumps everything. So, and if someone was touting their individual rights when I was mentioning Herman's kid, then they can't work at my company. It's pretty straightforward. In 2 years, all bets are off. We'll be back to resemble a pre-COVID world, but it's pretty straightforward.
I think that's a good place to leave it. I really appreciate all you coming together to talk about this, and I'm going to find a way to share out what we talked about today, and also figure out how we might be able to get in touch with each other about questions going forward. And I hope that we're all able to move on to get back in the office soon, and let's keep in touch.
Okay, thank you.
So, thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.